Welcome to this week edition of the Mirror Dialogue series. There have been a lot of discussion on social media concerning mistresses or side chicks, their right and that of their children, and then the recognition some families give them. And now we want to know if the kind of recognition they get, does it affect or influences the laws on marriage in our country? So we have here in our studio Assistant Registrar of the Ghana School of Law, who is also a lawyer. Miss Nina, you are welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we want to know your thoughts on the kind of legal protection that is available for wives in the country.
Okay, so there are laws that protect spouses, which is commonly referred to as spousal rights. However, there are no laws that protect mistresses. With respect to the spousal rights, there are rights that protect spouses in terms of divorce when there is death of one spouse and their children. And these have all been laid down in the Constitution, specifically Article 22 of the 1992 Constitution has made provision for spousal rights so that in the event of death, when nothing was left for the surviving spouse, the surviving spouse can make an application to the court, and then something will be given, something reasonable will be given to the surviving spouse. However, with respect to mistresses or side chicks, there are no laws protecting cohabitation or mistresses. And people have impressed upon Parliament to make laws to protect them. But however, as it stands now, there are no protection for them. It is only their children. That is where the side chick makes an application to the court, family tribunal, for maintenance orders. Then the court can make such orders for the upkeep of their children, but not for them as side chicks or mistresses.
Wow. So it means that it's the protection just covers their children.
Yes.
Yeah, but have you had cases that has to do with this kind of arrangement where side chick or mistress is making certain demands? And what was the advice you gave to that kind of a woman?
So yes, I have had that instance before. And so usually what the demands of the side chicks are revolves around financial support, time and attention, and then emotional connection.
For herself or that of the children?
For herself as the side chick, because she also believes that she's playing the role of a wife. However, the financial support is basically about maintenance, upkeep, payment of bills, and the likes. And then when it comes to the time and attention, the side chick demanded that her spouse took her out on dates, family trips, weekend trips, just as her partner was doing with her wife, legally married wife. And then also the man also expected emotional connection from the woman.
From the mistress?
From the mistress, in the sense that the mistress should be able to give him all the attention he's not getting from home. Let's not forget, because she's a mistress, she would not comment on the man's character or behavior, because after all, she's not married to the man. And so my advice to the side chick was that it is only your children who can benefit from the man. But for you, there's no protection for you because our laws do not recognize cohabitation.
Even when they have stayed in a very long period, let's say like 10 to 15 years, there's no protection for her.
There's no protection for her. To the extent that there's even no protection for informal marriages.
When you say informal marriage, what do you mean by informal marriage?
Informal marriage is also an example of cohabitation or side chick rights because you have not been married. However, in the eyes of the law, you go everywhere together. You are always moving together, portraying that you are married, but you are not married. So that's what we mean by informal marriage, that the marriage rights, be it customary or ordinance, have not been performed.
Wow. Okay, so in all these kind of arrangement with side chick, mistress, what do you consider the most pressing issue that needs to be addressed? with our marriage laws with regards to mistresses or side chicks?
So, in my opinion, there is no much laws protecting spouses, that is spousal rights. It's only Article 22 of the 1992 Constitution, which says that a spouse can make an application for a reasonable provision to be made for the spouse in the event of the death of the other spouse, where a will, for instance, a will was made and nothing was left for the surviving spouse. It is only the Supreme Court that have made pronouncements in cases
Okay.
that we are following now. And so, in my opinion, I think that Parliament should legislate to make a specific statute that will regulate spousal rights, specifically with regards to property. Because this whole issue about spousal rights, we all know it all revolves around property.
Yes.
And then when it comes to the side chicks or mistresses, there's still no law. And so, as far as we are concerned now, there's no law protecting them.
But in your years of practicing law, like looking at your own journey, what do you think? Do you think that there should be laws that should protect mistresses or side chicks who, in cases where they have children, yeah, with the man?
Okay, so as I indicated from the beginning, the children are covered
Yeah.
because children born in or out of wedlock are always covered
Sure.
in terms of property rights and maintenance orders. But for the women, for now, they are not covered. And so it is only when Parliament is able to legislate that mistresses should be covered by law, then they will get something. Otherwise, as it stands now, there's nothing for mistresses or side chicks.
Okay, so what are types of marriages that is recognized in our country, and what are their implications?
Okay, so there are three types of marriages. Customary marriage, which is mostly referred to as the engagement. That's what most people say. Customary marriage is potentially polygamous, meaning the man can marry as many wives as the man wants. However, the man must perform the customary rites of the spouse in accordance to the person's custom. And
Okay.
then the second type of marriage is the Mohammedan or the Islamic marriage, which is also potentially polygamous. However, the man can marry only up to 4 wives. Beyond the man cannot go beyond the four
Four
wives.
wives.
And then there's the ordinance, which most people refer to as Christian or civil marriage. That is potentially monogamous, meaning one wife, one man, to the exclusion of all others. And that also must follow the laid down procedure in terms of the notice, publication, and all that for it to be valid.
But you see, people do the engagement and they still go ahead to do the Christian marriage. That's the ordinance marriage. Is there any implications for that? Like, people must know what they are getting into.
So, customary marriage is not a requirement for ordinance marriage. So
Okay.
what it simply means is that if you want to marry under the ordinance, there's no requirement on you to have what has come to be accepted as the engagement.
Yeah.
It is not a requirement. And also, another unique feature about the ordinance marriage is that you don't need the consent of anybody, unlike the customary marriage. And so it is just, for the want of a better word, it's something that we have grown with. That people expect that, oh, once you are getting married under the ordinance, there should be a customary marriage, but it is not a requirement. So it is just for the fanfare.
Okay. Before I come back to the requirements for ordinance marriage, what's the valid requirement that makes marriage valid? And if you miss out on something, what's the consequence?
Okay, so in all the three types of marriage, there are separate requirements. And so for customary marriage, there's the consent requirement. And so you
Okay.
need consent from your family. And the marriage must also comply with the requisite customary rights of the spouses, and the marriage can be registered. However, it is just for evidentiary purposes. And when it comes to Islamic or Mohammedan marriage, there's also the requirement for registration. What most people are not aware is that that type of marriage must be registered within 1 week of the celebration of the marriage
That's
for the
Muslim
Mohammedan
people.
marriage. And so most Mohammedan marriages have been contracted not following the law, in my opinion, because the marriages have not been registered. And unlike the customary law where registration is not a requirement, for the Mohammedan marriage, it is a requirement that you register the marriage within 1 week of the celebration of the marriage
So where do you register the marriage?
at the registry.
Okay.
At the registry. Then when it comes to ordinance marriage, the requirement is that first of all, the notice must be issued. And then the notice takes 21 days. You do not need the consent of your parents. And then after the 21 days expires and there has been no objection raised, then the registrar's certificate will issue, and then the marriage will take place. However, if you do not want to wait for the 21 days requirement, you can go in for the special alliances. That is what the registrar of marriage, the principal registrar does at the Registrar General's department. So that's one, there's no requirement for 21 days notice.
Okay.
Then the marriage must be performed at the registrar's office or a licensed place of worship. And so for all you know, most marriages being celebrated now may not satisfy that requirement, because sometimes the venues where the weddings are held are not registered places for the marriage. And so it will just be for the fanfare of it. And then also, after the registration, the marriage then becomes valid in terms of the ordinance marriage. And so if you do not follow the laid down procedure, the marriage will either be void or voidable.
Okay. So, and in all these type of marriages, what are the benefits and drawbacks of ordinance marriage as compared to maybe customary or religious marriages?
So with the ordinance marriage, there's documentary trail,
Okay.
and there's also protection on paper
Okay.
against polygamy. I'm choosing my words carefully because, I mean, we all know and then hear of men who have contracted monogamous marriages
Yeah.
but have numerous mistresses. And so in my opinion, that is one of the cons against ordinance marriages. And then when it comes to customary or religious marriages, there's also religious or family connection and interference. The cons is that because there are multiple women, issues with respect to property distribution and all that are bound to happen in the event of the death of the husband.
Okay. You just mentioned property distribution. So, what's the right way? I mean, how is it done when in in circumstances where there's divorce or there's separation or there's some kind of complications? And how is it done? How should it be distributed fairly?
Okay, so the Supreme Court has laid down procedure when it comes to property distribution. And so in Mensa, for instance, the Supreme Court said that equality is equity. And then we moved to the Supreme Court saying that properties acquired during the life of a marriage is presumed to be marital property.
Properties. Okay.
However, that presumption can be rebutted when there's evidence that there's a gift, inheritance, and all those things. And also, the Supreme Court held further that domestic support all counts when it comes to marital properties. And then just about a week or some few days ago, the Supreme Court, speaking through Justice Amadou Tanko, has laid down new principles to be followed For instance, in the case of Aishitu versus Jamna, the court said that even in a marriage, properties can be acquired solely, and properties can also be acquired jointly. And when it comes to joint properties, it doesn't always mean that there must be financial contribution. The contribution can come in material forms, any kind of form at all. And that if you own the property jointly, there are instances that at the point of dissolving the marriage, that joint property can be given to one of the spouses and then the other gets money instead. And so it is not a carte blanche thing that you have to follow. However, it is determined on a case-by-case
Case.
basis.
Okay.
And so at one time, the Supreme Court can hold that equality is equity. And then at other times, the court can say that the equality is equity principle will not be fair. In all this, the court considers the Constitution in the decisions they come out with.
Okay. That take me to my next question. Before coming in, someone said I should ask you if in an event where you think that you and your husband have been married for maybe 5 years or 8 years, and you've done this, that, you have this here, this mansion here, and then in divorce, you are now finding out that all the papers and everything that you think that it was in your name, you and your husband, is now in the name of the mother. So the skills or whatever is that I don't have anything, and that the property is for my mother. How do you go about issues like this?
So the Supreme Court always looks at the circumstances of each case. And so, assuming you are saying today that the property is for your mother, the court is likely to look at the dates when the property was purchased and even the agreements that you had. And so, for instance, if my husband told me that, Nina, just be taking care of the home whilst I also build for us. And then later, he comes back and tells me that, oh, the house belongs to my mother. I can easily prove what he said to me. And so once you are able to prove that this was the agreement that you had, that you intended to own the property as a joint property, that will suffice against what he's claiming now that the
But
property
from what
belongs.
you're saying, that can be verbal. Oh, Shenkolano, like take care of the kids and let me do all the hard stuff. What do you have to prove that indeed he said it?
So our courts recognize not only written agreements, but
Okay.
verbal as well.
Okay.
And so once you go to court, the court will look at all the surrounding circumstances and they will be able to tell whether you are being truthful or not.
Okay. All right. So can you take us through divorce processes in Ghana, the documentation and all the needed?
Okay, so divorce processes in Ghana is regulated by the Matrimonial Causes Act.
Okay.
Well, the sole ground for divorce is that the marriage has broken down beyond reconciliation. However, this sole ground is evidenced by acts such as desertion, unreasonable behavior, adultery, amongst others. And so whoever wants to initiate the divorce proceedings will start so at a court of competent jurisdiction. That is, the petitioner will go to court and then start the process and then serve the process on the respondent. And the court is not in a hurry to dissolve the marriage, but the court will try to see if they can resolve the marriage, see if there can be reconciliation. And if in the minds of the court, reconciliation is not possible, then they will proceed with the nullity proceedings. And then after the nullity proceedings, or in the course of the nullity proceedings, there can be applications for maintenance orders in terms of taking care of the children, and then the property dissolution comes in. Then if everything is resolved, your divorce certificate will be issued to you and the marriage will be annulled.
Okay, so talking about property dissolution again, how is someone in customary marriage, for instance, a woman, how is she protected when it comes to property distribution, especially where there are several wives, like there are 2 or more wives in that kind of setting. How is the first one protected?
Okay, so the Matrimonial Causes Act also covers customary marriages,
Okay.
such that customary marriage parties can also make application to the courts for the marriage to be dissolved. And I
Okay.
always advise that that is the best, rather than what the accounts usually refer to as yenka ofie, because the reliefs you will get in court, you will not get from the matter being resolved at home. Because in the court, for instance, you can get maintenance orders, you can get some properties and all that. And so the Matrimonial Causes Act covers everybody in terms of marriage, whether customary, Mohammedan, or ordinance marriage.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We are grateful for the enlightenment, and we will be back your way next week with a different topic. Bye.
For more news, please visit our website graphic.com.gh or follow us on Facebook at Daily Graphic and on YouTube and Twitter at GraphicGH.
Subscribe now.